I become the best version of me, raised by certain degrees. They say I'm blunting disease, cause I spit anti-establishment. This is battleship, I'm calling your number and letter, and I only do it to make you better. Negative mindsets just won't let up, and I'm constantly battling my predecessors, cause I get too fed up. But the same when the same brings pain. Locks and chains reduce the potential of human brains. I'm too insane, at least it's what they label me. I'd rather be labeled as crazy than stuck in the matrix. I got Asia chasing cause I'm making these statements. I'm participating in the emancipation of a nation under interrogation. See my determination as you turn in these pages. I will never ever be degraded. They want me to dumb it down. They say the industry ain't ready for too pure of a sound, for too pure of a heart, for too much empathy. I will give it all till I empty me. This is my manifest destiny. Preferably dropping bombs over melodies. You feel it heavily, you're telling me. Watch out. But it brings a resistance. Please don't miss this. Consequence vicious. We need to destroy the traumas. Go back and heal for a better tomorrow. Face the pain that you want to avoid. Stick out your chest and raise up your voice. I will not bend, I will not break. Stand in my place and I won't be swayed. Mark my words, lives will be saved. And even after I die, my legacy will remain. My emotions run amok, I'm out of luck. What the flying flip is going on? I say I'm a king, but I'm showing pawn. My logic feels intoxicated. No love left cause my heart's been raided. Feeling jaded, want me medicated. Feeling like a fish cause I'm hooked and baited. And I can't find peace. I become my own worst enemy. Sipping Hennessy, feeling dead in me. If my pain were a woman, gotta let her free. Let it go. But she's holding on with a grip of death. The pain gets worse with every breath. I just wanna keep you in the dark so low. You feel it in your soul. Never see the light of day. You say, yeah, I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I don't like who I become. What have I done? I'm going numb, ain't having fun. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. Crazy is as crazy does. I catch myself trying to flirt with Lady Luck, but she just curves me. I'm worried, vision's blurry, feeling like death's coming early. You never get rid of me, even when you say that you're getting sick of me. Painted so vividly, making you sickening, feeling with misery, burning like Listerine. I spit on your grave, I'm taking control until you misbehave. The pain comes in waves, today I'm a slave. A trophy to gain, I'll put you on display. And laugh at your misfortune, laughing at your tears pouring, laughing at attempts of ignoring. Pieces foreign, the more you fight, the more you let me more in. This can't be life. Doc, help me out, I can no longer fight. I'm crying uncontrollably, I need a hold of me. What's life supposed to be? And I'm feeling suicidal. All my rivals got me quitting on survival. My heart needs to mend. I don't wanna kill myself, just want the pain to end. But this feels like an uphill battle. I see your misery with a broken paddle. I've journaled, have addictions. There's a hole in me cause something's missing. I'm in prison, in my mind. Gotta hear what's been left behind. EMDR, whatever it takes. If I don't see change, I swear I'm gonna break. I just wanna keep you in the dark so low. You feel it in your soul. Never see the light of day. You say, yeah, I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I don't like who I become. What have I done? I'm going numb, ain't having fun. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. I think I'm going crazy, 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 crazy. Keep hope alive. 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 Watch me do my work. Working hard to achieve my dreams, it's harder than it seems. Watch you do my work. Sky's the limit, gotta hit it till you fit it, revel in it. Watch you do my work. Hungry for change to have my name known, cause I say so while the days go. Watch you do my work. Cause I stand for a purpose. Watch you work this, cause I'm working. Watch you do my work. Watch you working harder than the evidence. Spitting from the hearts of people that feeling irrelevant. Spitting for the hell of it, embracing all the elements. Music, chemic, content that'll challenge your intelligence. This ain't for the faint to the heart. Mature folks thinking that I'm way too smart. Too mature for my age, wanna put me in the grave. But no need a safe face, cause I'm running my race. Running my race, even overweight. But you see me overweight, cause I'm stealing off your plate. And I'm feeling so great, even though I make mistakes. Do whatever it takes to make winning the Mason race. But you will never bury me. Talking bad about the man is like kerosene. I'm fine like kerosene, apparently my words are like therapy. Watch you do my work. Working hard to achieve my dreams, it's harder than it seems. Watch you do my work. Sky's the limit, gotta hit it till you fit it, revel in it. Watch you do my work. Hungry for change to have my name known, cause I say so while the days go. Watch you do my work. Cause I stand for a purpose. Watch you work this, cause I'm working. Watch you do my work. I don't look like a rapper, what they look like, what they sound like, why they sound bite. I'm too busy cruising in my lane, I don't need to buy fame. And this is why I came to put in work in the hearts of man. There's nothing harder than I like a martyr can. Watch you do my work, watch you do it well. Been through hell and I'm telling a story that's so compelling. It's got me screaming and yelling, negative is a repellent. And ain't no dreams I'm selling, cause it gets so numb I'm rebelling. I work hard, you can tell, full of heart, raising hell. Cause you're gonna see me rock the scene like prophecy on a lock and key. It's gotta be something to write home about, cause I work with pride, I got a fire inside. Watch you do my work. Working hard to achieve my dreams, it's harder than it seems. Watch you do my work. Sky's the limit, gotta hit it till you fit it, revel in it. Watch you do my work. Hungry for change to have my name known, cause I say so while the days go. Watch you do my work. Cause I stand for a purpose. Watch you work this, cause I'm working. Watch you do my work. Work, work, work. Watch you do my work. Work, work. Watch you put in that work, work, work. Watch you do my work, work, work. Watch you put in that work, work, work. Watch you do my work, work, work. Watch you put in that work, work, work. Watch you do my work, work, work. Watch you do my work. Working hard to achieve my dreams, it's harder than it seems. Watch you do my work. Sky's the limit, gotta hit it till you fit it, revel in it. Watch you do my work. Hungry for change to have my name known, cause I say so while the days go. Watch you do my work. Cause I stand for a purpose. Watch you work this, cause I'm working. Watch you do my work. Working hard to achieve my dreams, it's harder than it seems. Watch you do my work. Sky's the limit, gotta hit it till you fit it, revel in it. Watch you do my work. Hungry for change to have my name known, cause I say so while the days go. Watch you do my work. Cause I stand for a purpose. Watch you work this, cause I'm working. Watch you do my work. Work, work, work. Watch you do my work, work, work. Watch you put in that work, work, work. Watch you do my work, work, work. Watch you put in that. We have a problem. Uh-oh, there's a problem in the industry. You probably didn't think too many people would be into me. You want carbon copies? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint. It's a breaking point. Words so absurd that I'm breaking joints. Who's this brother in a suit jacket think he is? Don't even know that rappers ain't taking this serious. It's all about making hits, lyrics to the side. Humility isn't welcome cause we're talking about pride. Hey, folks, welcome to Therapy Thursdays. I'm just in a really good mood right now. I'm really excited for this episode. I'm really happy that you guys are here with us. I'm really excited that our guest therapist is here with us today. But welcome to Therapy Thursdays, where we bring the therapist to you. I am your host, Marcus Alexander Velasquez, and I'm very happy that you're here with us today. For those of you who may be new to the show, Therapy Thursdays is a show where we get very real, very raw, very honest about mental health issues, about therapy, obviously, because therapy is in the title of the show. The reason I am so passionate about this is because I went through therapy on my own and still continue to go about 6 or 7 years on and off. Have grown tremendously from it. I am such a big advocate for therapy. That's why I created the show. And it is an underutilized resource that is available to everyone. Not only is it underutilized, but there is misinformation when it comes to formal professional therapy. Or some people just have no idea. They maybe heard about it, but nobody in their family ever went. They haven't gone and they have no idea what it's about. So this show is meant to give you a taste of therapy. The show in itself is not therapy, but it is meant to give you a taste of therapy, to introduce you to the world of therapy, and to introduce you to some professionals that do this on a daily basis. So in this show, you get real credible information from pros who do this on a daily basis, who have done this for years, who are licensed. This is a beautiful platform, and I'm really honored to be the host and just to be a part of this thing. I love this show so much because I learned so much. I put the topics together, the majority of them, but I know very little when it comes to it. I am not a therapist. I want to make that abundantly clear. But like I said, I'm a huge fan of therapy. I love just digging deep into the human mind. I am an analytical thinker. I love to figure things out. I'm a systems guy. I love it's like a puzzle that you can put together, and it's just amazing. I was already an analytical thinker, and then I got introduced to the world of therapy, and they were like the perfect match. So there are times where I have to stop analyzing because I can go too deep sometimes. But yeah, I'm really excited about today's show. Today's topic is going to be a heavy one. We've done a lot of heavy topics on the show before. We had 2 different shows on suicide and other heavy topics. This is going to be another one. We're talking about domestic violence today. So like I said, we're not afraid to dig deep. We're not afraid to talk about the real things in life because it is a reality. It's a sad reality, but it's a real reality that domestic violence exists. And therapy is an excellent resource to help people going through domestic violence. So like I said, I'm not afraid to talk about the deep, heavy topics. There are people out there, even you may be watching this right now, and you may be struggling or suffering from domestic violence. This show is for you. Please take this information. Please listen, and most importantly, please apply it. If you click in the description below this video, there's a link on there to a Google spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet is the contact information for every single guest therapist that we have. You can literally find their phone numbers, email addresses, types of insurance they take, any specialties, etc., etc. So please utilize that resource. Again, this show is great, but it is just an introduction. My goal and my hope with this show is to spur you to seek out formal therapy for yourself. Let me make it abundantly clear. I believe everybody walking the face of this earth should have a therapist, and I believe every therapist should have a therapist. So I love the show, and I'm so happy you're here. So I want to get into our disclaimer before we bring our wonderful guest on. This show is for informational purposes only. You are completely responsible for what you do with the information presented, and myself and all of our guests cannot be held liable for any misuse or misunderstandings of the information presented. Please always consult a trained mental health professional before making any decisions regarding treatment of yourself and others. Awesome. Well, we are going to introduce our guest for today. I'm so happy that she's here. She signed up a while ago, and her day finally came. So I'm glad we're still both around to have her on the show. But yeah, let's get to it, shall we? Please help me introduce and welcome Miss Dorian Ortega. Hello, hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yay, yes.
Sweet. How are you today?
I'm doing well, growing, learning.
There you go. I love it. Thank you for
every
being
day.
here.
Of course, thank you for
What's
having
that
me.
behind you?
That is an art piece from a gallery exhibit early in the spring from the artist Steph Skills. So that's what's here. And then
Sweet.
it's just I don't know if you can see my fake plant, but you can't. So
Nice. No, I saw the background was colorful, so I was just wondering what that was.
yeah, I'm in
Awesome.
the place where I practice.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very appropriate.
Yes.
Great. So thank you again for being here. Really appreciate you and your time because you volunteered your time. Every therapist on the show volunteers their time. So thank you for that. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself, nothing too deep, maybe a minute or two, but we'd like to know your background, how long you've been in practice for, if you have any specialties that you like to focus on. And then, of course, my favorite question to ask is what inspired you to become a therapist in the first place?
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for the show. Um, my name is Dorian Ortega. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I've been licensed for the past 4 years. Um, my practice is called Fly Radical Therapy, and Fly stands for First Love Yourself. And
So cool, by the
radical,
way.
thank you. And radical therapy is about how systemic oppression affects mental wellness.
Mm,
It is a therapeutic approach that is recognized by the American Psychological Association as a way to introduce how different systems within society impact mental health. And so
wow.
my focus is with adults. I work with children, families. My background is in Latinx mental health specifically. That's what I specialized in, and Black mental health. More recently,
Sweet.
LGBTQ plus gender and sexuality related mental health. And I have a private practice here in Humboldt Park at the Honeycomb Network, which is a co-working space for artists, all run by women of color and centering people of color and people who are LGBTQ plus. And I recently added on 3 other therapists who have just started
Nice.
a few months ago. So it's really
Congrats.
exciting. Thank you. Growing. Um, who specialize to meet with children who do dance therapy, art therapy, and racial identity development therapy. Um, so I've been practicing. This will be my 9th year. July was my 9 year anniversary.
Congrats.
And thank you. Um, what inspired me? What inspired me to become a therapist, to be true and honest, this was the last thing I thought I would ever do with my life.
Hmm.
I was always interested in psychology and the way that the human mind works and
Yes.
understanding mental processing and behavior and how those things are related. However, I didn't imagine myself sitting on the edge of, working with folks one on one. I was more interested in research. And so, actually, after undergrad, I was working as a research assistant for an asthma research project in Humboldt Park
Hmm.
for Puerto Ricans with asthma. And we also worked with folks dealing with diabetes. And so part of my interest was in public health, actually, originally. And I
Oh,
was more
okay.
interested in health and how folks work through or can improve their behavior and have healthier lifestyles. So through that research is actually how I developed the interest. One of our research project managers was a Puerto Rican psychologist who studied mental health as psychology, and I just thought that was really interesting. Um, Through the research, we actually started to understand why people weren't taking their medications, or at least the correlation of why people weren't taking their medication and why people weren't necessarily taking care of themselves when we started to ask the question about depression.
Hmm.
When we asked people um, about depression and gave folks screeners, we noticed significantly high rates in everyone that we were working with. Um, and so that alone, as well as the principal investigator, like I said, this Puerto Rican psychologist, inspired me to work to further my education in clinical mental health. And I found a wonderful program that had a specialty in Latinx mental health, which is right here in Chicago, called the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Um, and I fell in love. It's like something that found me. It's like I never knew I could do this, and it would be so welcome in the community that I serve.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. You just had not too long ago, right? A little bundle of joy.
I did. I had a little bit, 7
Congrats.
months now. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
It's been a beautiful blessing to manage a practice and be a mom, a parent. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
I foresee you in the future counseling moms once you get that experience under your belt.
Yeah, people are already kind of asking about it. I'm like, mommy child therapy sessions. Let's see,
Hey,
support groups,
there you go.
radical support groups,
I
radical
love it.
mom support groups. Yeah, I
Sweet.
want to get the t-shirts first. So
There you go. I love it. Hey, you mentioned did I hear correctly? You said Honeycomb Community Wellness Group?
the Honeycomb Network. It's called the Honeycomb
Oh,
Network. So my practice is housed here at the Honeycomb Network, which is actually a co-working space. It's
oh,
a
cool.
artist incubator space where we have an apothecary. So we sell herbs, we sell spiritual tools, um, and it's a space where people can come rent to co-work. And so when I opened the practice, I wanted to open a practice in a place that was in the neighborhood in Hopewell Park, first of all,
Yeah.
and also in a place that didn't seem like a typical therapy space. It's very vibrant, it's colorful,
Mm.
there's all types of plants here. And I wanted to be in a space where you walk in and no one would know what you're walking in for.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and you could
Very
feel the
cool.
healing when you walk in.
Very cool. That's the first I heard of that.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Sweet. Well, let's get into it. I just want to remind our audience, one of the best features or benefits of this show is that we are live and you have a live Q&A portion at any time you want. So anyone who's watching us live, please feel free to submit your questions and comments, and we will do our best to answer your questions. I will tell you, Dorian will be answering the questions, not me. She's the pro. But if you have any questions for her, either on today's topic, which again is a sensitive topic, if you're willing to disclose that information, thank you for being vulnerable. But if you don't, that's understanding. We understand that. But yeah, please, any questions or comments, either on today's topic or anything mental health related, please do not be shy. Please put them in the chat. So, Dorian, let's get into it. One of the things I like to do on the show is because there are so many terms that are loose, just thrown out and used loosely without really knowing what they mean. So I always want to make sure we define our terms correctly and according to the pros. So can you give us your clinical definition of what is domestic violence?
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you said that because there is a legal term for
Mm,
domestic violence, and then there is like the clinical term for domestic violence, and there is a
wow.
difference. So legally, domestic violence is a violence committed by a person within your circle. Domestic meaning like, sorry, my plant.
You're okay.
Domestic meaning like usually in house, in the home. And legally, it is somewhat, I'm going to just look at my notes here. Domestic violence is committed by someone within the, and I'm going to put victims
Mm,
because some people like to refer themselves as survivors. So I'll
okay.
use both of those terms simultaneously. And this includes partners, ex partners, immediate family members, other relatives, and family and friends. Um, this is domestic violence usually is referred to a close relationship between the person who is the offender and the person who is the victim or the survivor.
Mm,
Um, Typically, in the legal, that is usually the legal definition. And then clinically, it looks different and it's usually defined by the following ways. Um, One is the most common and popular, which is physical violence, hitting, bruising, right? Being thrown at. Um, what people don't always think about or don't always cause an emergency for, or where maybe legal systems don't always honor, is the emotional or psychological abuse.
mm,
People tend to focus on physical or sexual abuse. So, sexual abuse would be another act of
yeah.
domestic violence or be considered. But mental and psychological abuse tends to be actually the most long impacting type
Mm,
of abuse that happens in the home. And this looks like manipulation, this looks like threats. So maybe someone's not being hit in the home physically, but maybe someone's throwing things across the room at them. And that is not a physical abuse, but that would be a psychological abuse.
mm,
Someone's being threatened, someone's being financially manipulated. People
yep.
don't always think about that part when it comes to domestic violence. Um, People usually are coerced to maybe do something that they didn't want to do.
Mm,
Um, and then there are intricacies with children and families. So sometimes partners, if it's a partner relationship, can maybe perhaps manipulate the children or even keep someone isolated from friends, control people's
mm,
clothing, what they wear, where they go. These are more psychological abuses that aren't typically honored by the legal system, but are
wow.
definitely terms and behaviors that we notice in therapy.
You may not have an answer for this, and that's fine, but based on your explanation, why do you believe that there is a discrepancy between the legal definition and the clinical definition?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think it might be a little obvious because of the lack of evidence. So with the legal
Mm,
system, if there's evidence to show like a bruise, if there's evidence to show that there's witnesses, there's, evidence really. And so the only time that it might be considered like psychological abuse might be considered is when there is text messages, right?
mm,
There's maybe rarely this happens, but recordings, right? Sometimes I don't know. Well, we just saw the trial, the very public trials of Johnny Depp
mm,
and his ex-partner, and there were recordings that were displayed of like certain things that were being said, right? If those things aren't typically people don't record, it's really difficult. If you're, in a situation, sometimes you won't think about doing it, but recordings are one of the ways that people would know that you're being psychologically manipulated. If that doesn't exist, it's really hard to prove you're going through a psychological abuse. And again, with sexual abuse too, sexual abuse tends to be hard to prove unless there is a physical examination, unless ideally when someone goes through and it's so difficult because everyone is, rightfully so traumatized by anything that might happen in that
yeah.
way. But if you don't go to authorities right away, like maybe hours or even within the day that it happens, it's really hard to prove that it actually happened.
Wow. That stinks.
So the
Um,
legal system works in that way, right? I mean, you
yeah.
have to kind of prove your case.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually a really good point about recording things too. I think that'd be a good suggestion if somebody's watching and then maybe in that situation. Obviously, we all have cell phones; they all have microphones on them. You can download free apps to record stuff, so that might be a good tool. Because, like you said, if it's going to get to the point where it has to be taken to a legal place, you need the evidence. So something like that would be great. That's great.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
So obviously we an abusive relationship versus a healthy relationship has many differences. Can you talk about some of the differences and how do you know you're in a healthy versus an abusive relationship?
Yeah, I really love to use this resource. So I'm going to pull it up. This teen dating prevention resource that I always share with folks, it just breaks it down so easily and it's so colorful. It's called loveisrespect.org. And they
Ooh,
have beautiful images as well as quizzes to know, like, how do you know if you're in a healthy or unhealthy or abusive relationships. So there's a spectrum that I like to refer to to define the ways that we know that we're in a healthy and kind of a cautionary area, and then where it's straight up abusive. So I'm going to read out some of the suggestions here. So a healthy relationship would look like both you and your partner, and I would say like friends, right? This is any healthy relationship. You're communicating, right? In respectful ways. You're being respectful towards each other. So you're respecting each other's boundaries, each other's space. There's trust, right, in the relationship. You can be honest with each other. This isn't on there, but you feel safe with the person,
Mm.
right? That's really
Yep.
important too. There's equality, right? In the relationship, there's shared responsibilities and an understanding of those agreements of how we operate in relationships and meet each other's needs.
Okay.
We enjoy each other's time,
Mm.
right? It's joyful,
Nice.
ideally. We're able to make mutual choices, right, together. This isn't on here, but we operate independently. Like you have your thing, I have my thing.
Hmm.
So we can be interdependent.
Mm.
Um,
Good word.
and there's like economic and financial agreements. Like we both can understand that, you know, we help each other, or we kind of just have our own thing going on. So those are healthy relationship qualities. Where it starts to become cautionary, so this is like the yellow area,
Mm.
where it's unhealthy, and maybe, you know, if some of these things are happening, these are like the some of the flags, some of the signs where if you don't get help now, it might turn abusive.
Mm.
Unhealthy is when you're not communicating. So there's maybe like silent treatments that happen.
Mm.
There's disrespect with each other. There's no trust, right? Or you're not trusting each other, or finding times that it's difficult to be honest with each other. So there's
Mm.
lying, right? There's little fibs, as they like to say. And you're starting to notice that there's control happening. So the thing about relationships, like these things aren't very obvious in the beginning of a
Mm.
relationship. So it's really hard to gauge, because people who tend to be perpetrators of violence tend to tend to know who they're dealing with. So its perpetrator is almost like they're noticing people's behaviors, and they can tell who this is going to work with and who this isn't going to work with.
Mm.
So sometimes when people are starting a relationship, the perpetrator might be paying attention to, maybe, you know, you let me kind of do this or that with you, and so sometimes they take it to the next level. The thing about it is that when people they're, you know, perpetrators are watchful, and again, they usually tend to observe and know with who they can be abusive with and with who they cannot be. So noticing that people are starting to take control, only spending time together, so not trying to have other friends or any other social activities without each other. There's pressure into the activities that you do together, and there's unequal distribution of economic, like, finances. So unless there's not a stated agreement, like you take care of this and I'll take care of
Right.
that, there's this like manipulative way that people can use finances against someone else. And then when you're in an abusive relationship, the communication is very hurtful, threatening, violent. There's usually more intense arguments. So there's communication, but they're met in very intense and threatening ways. There's mistreatment. There's accusations. People deny their actions. So gaslighting is a newer term that more and more folks are using. People who are perpetrators tend to gaslight situations, tend to deny or try to make the other person at fault. There's,
Mm.
again, the main part that people should know about an abusive relationship is there's a dynamic of power and control that the person wants over you in your entire
Wow.
life.
Yeah.
And then usually is when the partner tries to isolate you from others. So those are abusive tendencies, and again, important to pay attention to some of these signs as early as you can. But again, perpetrators tend to be pretty um, uh, observant, and might not always show the signs right away.
Mm. Yeah, and that's tough, especially in the beginning of a relationship because it's brand new. They're the best person ever. You only focus on the good, or if you see a couple bad things or not so good things, you're more likely to sweep it under the rug and ignore it because you got that new high from the new love. And that's tough because your emotions are obviously involved. You talked as well about sexual assault, and the best case scenario is to go to a hospital within hours or the same day of that happening. With that, that's crazy traumatic, and that person's emotions are all over the place. So to then in that moment have to say, oh, well, I have to, well, the best case scenario is to go to the hospital, get myself checked out and other stuff. Like, these are tough situations, man, and emotions come into play and can take over, and it's very hard for us to make strictly logical decisions. That's tough.
Of course. And there's assistance out there. I just wanted to share if somebody was
Yeah.
to go to the hospital, there is a rape victim hotline where someone will show up at the hospital with you and support you.
Oh,
So
wow.
not everybody knows that that exists, but they will come within hours and actually advocate for you in the hospital. So you're
Wow,
not
that's
alone.
great. What's that resource?
It's a rape victims hotline. I think if you Google it, you can find it. Just rape victim hotline, or yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have it offhand, but
I have National Sexual Assault Hotline.
that's probably the right one.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there.
Lots,
Um,
yeah.
wow. Yeah, we suggest for our audience, if you want to find some information, Google is your best friend. Please utilize it.
Hmm.
When I was doing research for today's topic and preparing the questions for our show, sometimes I have, obviously you submitted some questions to me. I'll have some preconceived questions and I'm ready to go. But a lot of times I'll just come up with questions in the moment and in the
Sure.
process of preparing. One of the biggest things with this show is there's a difference between theory and practice. So theory is reading out of books and ideal scenarios, and then you have practice, which is just real life, and real life
Hmm.
doesn't always match up to the theory. So
Hmm.
I want to talk about these therapeutic topics, but in layman's terms, and talk about how they apply to everyday life and everyday people. So I don't want this show to come across as like a classroom session. This is more of a discussion and how people can implement things in their life right now it's practical information.
Hmm.
So one of the questions I came up with while I was doing this is, I know the answer to this, but I still want to talk about it. And the question is, can men be victims of domestic violence? And I asked that because based on my research, women, females are the overabundant, person that gets the abuse. So just to flip it for a second, can men be victims of domestic violence? And
Hmm.
how is that for a man to come forward and admit that? Because that can be a lot harder for a man to admit.
Hmm. Thank you for that question. I want to answer it in a way that is welcoming of other genders and
Okay.
people who identify as other genders. So I think anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. Anyone, no matter how you identify. Um, Certainly, people who identify as males can be victims of domestic violence. People who are also trans actually are the highest um, victims rates for trans people.
Wow.
Um, so there's certainly, um, I'm glad you asked this actually because I think it helps to understand how domestic violence is treated in our legal system.
Mm.
That tends to, and in our society. And so our society, and also there's a global society that honors what's called patriarchy. And patriarchy is the dominance of men or men in power within many systems and in our society. And so for a man or someone who identifies as a man to say that they're a victim when they are the ones that are supposed to have the power and control
Mm.
isn't always welcome, isn't always honored, isn't always respected. And so when we live in a society that enables men to be violent, to not show or express emotion, It's really, it can be really difficult for someone who is going through this to come out and talk about it. And again, could be difficult for anyone. It's embarrassing for everyone and shameful for everyone that goes through a violent situation with someone who's supposed to love you.
That's good. Thank you for making that distinction. I appreciate that. There's another, I would say, common situation, but the situation that I've heard of a lot in regards to domestic violence. And I want to talk about that, especially from your professional point of view. And, I don't really know how to say it other than just saying it, is that some people involved in domestic violence choose to stay. And I know, obviously, from the outside, people can be extremely judgmental when it comes to that. Why don't you just leave, et cetera, et cetera. So I do know some people choose to stay. And can you explain some of the reasons why a person might choose to stay in a domestic violence relationship?
Thank you for that question. I think that that question comes with a lot of assumptions that people just want that, or they just love this person so much that they just can't leave. It's very layered. And so I did a domestic violence, so I'm trained as a domestic violence counselor.
Awesome.
And one of the first things, and main things as a counselor when working with someone is you never tell people to leave. You don't know what their situation is, and sometimes it's actually more dangerous for them to leave than to stay.
Wow.
There fortunately are several extreme cases that exist of people and women mostly, right? Or people identify as women. When they try to leave, they're oftentimes followed, threatened, searched, depending on the type of power that person has over them. It could be a certain power position. It could be, in some cases, especially if there's an economic power over the other partner, there's ways that they're able to find them, and in some cases, in extreme cases, murder them.
Wow.
It is very, very common in many other societies that don't have a strong legal system and don't have a high regard for women or people, where many women die.
Oh, I think we're losing her. All right, there you go. You're back. Nope, you're frozen.
Hello?
There you go.
Sorry about that. I don't know what
That's
happened.
okay.
I was just basically stating that, so, sometimes it's more dangerous to leave in so many cases. If there isn't a very strategic safety plan in place, please don't advise anyone to leave unless you're directly going to help with the security and the safety planning of that individual.
Wow.
And
That's
safety
good.
planning is very key because sometimes it has to be very strategic to the point where planning it ahead of time, having things in place. I have like 5 considerations to take in mind, but there are specific safety planning tips that someone can use. I do want to share like why people sometimes stay. They might feel unsafe. They might actually depend on this person financially, economically, for housing. We don't, there's so many different situations. The psychological damage is so extreme that that person probably thinks truly that they deserve this and that
Wow.
this is where they need to be and this is the only place they can be.
Yeah.
Again, the most common thing I've heard folks say is the psychological damage is actually worse than the physical harm.
Yeah.
So when people stay in these relationships, many times people around them maybe just lose interest or try to manage. I mean, sometimes people put themselves in harmful ways to try to protect victims or survivors. It can be timely. It needs to be timed right. There needs to be a lot of things sometimes in place for extreme situations.
That's great. Thank you for that. So let's dig into it because this is Therapy Thursdays. So how can a therapist help someone involved in domestic violence? Because there's always this same topic comes up over and over again, which people are like, oh, well, I don't need a therapist because I talk to my friends, or the gym
Mm,
is my therapy, things like that, which are
mm.
not therapy whatsoever. So let us know how a professional licensed therapist can help someone involved with domestic violence that can do way more than the gym or a friend can.
Sure. Well, a therapist would definitely work with someone to assess the situation, provide a safe space for someone to feel like they can vent, talk, process what's happening. Many times, if it is extreme cases, therapists are actually legally and ethically required to sometimes call emergency numbers if there are children involved, or if there are people like elderly folks involved, or people with disabilities involved in a domestic violence case. We're considered folks that have to call in those emergency situations to protect the safety of children and people who are vulnerable. And so many friends may not do that, right? But it's our responsibility to intervene if this person's life is being threatened. And what we would do is also work through a safety plan or harm reduction in the sense of how to manage reducing harm, at least at home, as best as possible. Some folks may not be ready to leave, and we have to manage that reality and create a
Yeah.
safe space for them to honor their decision, right?
Yep.
We are people with autonomy, and everyone has usually, right, unless they're being coerced or manipulated, and some of these layered things are happening. But if folks choose to stay in this relationship, we do have to talk about the impact that it might have, especially if there's children or other people involved. So that's usually what the therapeutic experience would look like, aside from creating treatment plans, right, goals. Um, Again, creating that safe space and really encouraging folks to create a safe network space. Some friends aren't always very friendly when they maybe disagree with the decision to stay. So
Mm,
sometimes, actually, I usually encourage folks attend a support group so that they're able to hear from folks who have gone through
that's
some
good.
of these things and have a space where they can feel like they can relate.
That's good. That's great. Yeah. You guys are licensed for a reason. So we would definitely want to push people towards the pros. Um, and yeah, I know therapy is a beautiful tool and that can help a lot of people that are involved in this situation. I want to switch perspectives real quick instead of the people watching who may be the person in a domestic violence situation. I'd like to talk about those that maybe surround a person in that situation. So
Mm.
if we suspect someone we know is involved with domestic violence, how can we best support them?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, if you can be a listening ear, a non-judgmental ear, or
Mm,
even create some agreements with your friend, because again, we're thinking about relationships and creating a healthy one, at least with your friend, might look like there's some boundaries. So maybe if you are prepared to hear what's happening, maybe you want to really check in with yourself and make sure you're taking care of yourself, um, in order to share space and have capacity to be a supportive ear to someone. Um, if you're someone who doesn't always have capacity, make sure you're creating maybe some boundaries with your friend. Um, have resources available just in case. You never know if they're gonna say yes one day. Um, if you can, again, have several resources. So sometimes people have like that one friend, but sometimes you might not have capacity. So make sure that you're also knowing about the resources that are available. If you are volunteering yourself to be that safe person and create a safety plan with your friend, make sure you're aware of a couple of things. Um, some of the things I'd like to talk about is like, recognize their home, if there are places, exits that they might come out of, create a plan. Make sure that you're a person who has other safety plans in place for yourself. Who would you call? Who would you need support with in case you are helping this person? Um, Make sure that you're documenting as much as you can. You might be a witness, and so maybe you want to save some things. Um, Maybe if you want to have an emergency bag for that person or somewhere they can stay or create space for them in case they need to leave. Um, and I have this option as protection as a broad term.
Hmm.
Protection can look different for different people. Sometimes people think of protection as spiritual, sometimes they think of it as physical or emotional. This is whatever is in your beliefs and values. Sometimes people call in other people. There are some, actually, if you, in the neighborhood of Humboldt Park in Chicago, there's a group of people called the Young Lords who volunteer themselves to be to intervene instead of police when certain things are happening in neighborhoods, when people don't feel like calling police or they don't want to call police and people don't want to cause that much attention.
Wow.
So sometimes being present, I know this is really difficult, but perpetrators of violence tend to change their behavior around others that are
Mm,
watching, right?
yeah.
Some people do this hidden, right? They do it hiding. So when there's someone around and present, sometimes people that can de-escalate the situation on its own. I don't encourage escalating and getting into it with that person, but sometimes just showing up might already calm that person down and could reduce the harm for your friend.
Mm. That's good. Thank you for that. I know we mentioned them throughout the show, but if you have any more available that you like to share with people, but what resources are available to those who are involved with domestic violence?
Yeah, there is a hotline, domestic violence hotline that folks can use. Uh, loveisrespect.org. I love that. Just I know it's mostly for teens, but it's super helpful for adults and comprehensive for anyone. Sarah's Circle and the Association House are some local, or Sarah's Inn, I think, and Sarah's Circle are some local like domestic violence shelters. Um, and there are some I would like to say that you know, post pandemic ish. There are lots of places that are probably overwhelmed with cases,
Mm,
given that many people have had to stay home and domestic violence has been on the rise these
yeah.
past few years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, several deaths have occurred within our city alone.
Mm,
And so I truly, truly can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a safety net in your own community and your neighborhood. Local is best, right? Because if people are watching, that it tends to go down. If people are noticing and people are paying attention and calling in support with you, people, it tends to be safer in the community. So I usually advocate for local support, neighbor support. Get to know your neighbors, get to know
mm.
people around you, so that, whenever something happens, you're able to have some extra eyes.
Great advice. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Yep. So we threw some of the resources up on the screen right now. On your screen is the hotline for domestic violence. Going back to the website that Doreen mentioned, loveisrespect.org. You said that there are quizzes that you can take on that website too.
Yeah, to know if you're in a healthy or unhealthy or abusive relationship.
Very cool. Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add on today's topic?
I just want to add that this is a global issue, so it's not just here in the United States. These are
Mm,
global issues that are dealt with, and it's really unfortunate. There's something like more women have been killed than any war.
wow.
There's some stats about how common and uh, how unfortunate systems have played a role in the
Mm,
support and protection of women and trans people. So I just want to share that this is a global issue that everyone is affected by. And so if you are someone that is identifies as someone who is in a privileged position, such as yourself, right? As a male, you have a particular privilege that you're utilizing this platform for. I'd just like to share that this is, it's helpful for people in privileged positions to really speak out about these things and to be interventionists as much as they can with their own safety in mind. I'd like to share that there's a group of women in India, because again, in other parts of the world, domestic violence is just common and no one cares about it,
Mm.
unfortunately, and no one has legal systems in place to protect them. But there are these pink ladies who beat up people in groups like a gang.
Wow.
And they will come to your house and mess you up if
Wow.
if they get the call. So people in community, again, have to use the safety net around them when systems
Mm.
don't protect them. I don't condone violence. I think that it's still important to learn how to protect yourself. I always encourage anybody I work with, especially if they're women or trans people, to consider a self-defense class, because unfortunately, it's too common. Violence and assault is way too common in our society, and we want to be mindful and protective of ourselves and our bodies as best as we can.
Amen to that. Awesome. Dorian, you are phenomenal. Thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you
I'm
so
going to throw
much
your
for having me.
website on the screen. If anyone wants to connect with Dorian, that is her website on the screen. It is flyradicaltherapy.com, and fly stands for first love yourself. Really cool.
Thank you.
Dorian, are you taking on any new clients?
I personally am not, but the therapists I work with are. So we do have openings for folks who are interested in seeking therapy.
Very cool. Yes. If you want to connect with Dorian and her team, please utilize the website on your screen, flyradicaltherapy.com. Again, you can click on the link in the description of this video that will bring up a Google spreadsheet that has all of her contact information, as well as all of our other guest therapists. Please utilize these resources. Please utilize therapy. Please utilize this information. And again, be willing to be honest, weak, raw, whatever you want to call it, but be human at the end of the day, because we all can grow in some area. And I love that there are groups of people that will support one another. I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to finish with our disclaimer one more time. This show is for informational purposes only. You are completely responsible for what you do with the information presented, and myself and all of our guests cannot be held liable for any misuse or misunderstanding of the information presented. Please always consult a trained mental health professional before making any decisions regarding treatment of yourself and others. Dorian, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
Please
for
come
having me.
back. You have access to the spreadsheet. So if there are any other openings, I think you signed up for another episode
I
or
think
two.
so, in a few months. And I just want
Okay.
to share, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So look out for more information. If folks are more interested in learning how to get involved or maybe support organizations that are doing incredible work.
Very cool. Well, you are always welcome back.
Thank
You
you.
have the spreadsheet, so feel free to sign up for any topics. If there's any topics you'd like to talk about that I haven't listed, please let me know, and I'd be happy to add it to the list. But thank you again for being here. Everyone
Thank
else in
you.
the audience, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. We will be back next week, next Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and every Thursday to discuss another mental health topic and therapy in general. So thank you guys for being here. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Work, watch you do my